Well, happy Sunday and good morning. Good to be with you. I am Sean Starr. Welcome to another live extravaganza of the Sean Starr Show on YouTube.com. Good to be with you on this game day. Yeah, the rare Sunday afternoon as we wind down the Montreal Canadiens regular season, who for a moment in time on Saturday found themselves into a playoff spot. But here we are waking up together on Sunday morning with Montreal having played 72 games, having picked up a total of 75 points, but it's the New York Rangers who pick up a massive win as they wrap up their California road trip here. Now have 77 points. But yeah, after Columbus, they got going with Ottawa yesterday, and after the BJs lost that one, Montreal, based off the tiebreaker there, found themselves back in a playoff spot as the Canadiens moved to Sunrise on this game day. 1 o'clock this afternoon as Montreal gets set to take on the Florida Panthers, and no doubt Montreal has had Florida's numbers. And what's interesting here, and we'll get into other developments as we move around the Montreal Canadiens on this game day with Ivan Demidov and his KHL team going about and doing their thing, and Ivan Demidov back very much in the mix and very much scoring goals. And so it's going to be a fascinating stretch drive down the stretch for Montreal. So we say good morning. Good morning, Rick Springhetti. It's a 1 p.m. game on a Sunday afternoon, and I love it. And I prefer yesterday's audio. Max Hedrum vibes. Yes, thank you so much. Yeah, that was that was a frustrating experience. I'm not gonna lie. Good morning, Peter. Good morning, Naz. Just trying and tinkering with different things all the time. I was just trying to make this as good as I can, and it's not so easy sometimes. In the sense of I get up and just turn on the switch and off we go. No, there's not gonna lie. There's a little bit of a preparation that goes into this thing, and to see it all kind of go to waste yesterday greatly annoyed me. But no doubt it's good to see so many familiar faces. My pal Didier Jadot is back here after the Laval Rocket lose to the Lehigh Valley Phantoms. But it doesn't really matter in the sense that the Laval Rocket, the best team in the American Hockey League, had clinched their playoff spot. And we are starting to see some outstanding developments from certain individuals. Collectively, the team has done unbelievably well, but guys like Jared Davidson, Adam Engstrom, Florian Jacki emerging, right? And the Laval Rocket expected to do some significant damage. And what does that mean for the Montreal Canadiens moving forward? Because what I think has happened here with Montreal and the fact that let's be honest, I'm very comfortable talking to you today with the very strong, realistic belief that despite the fact that we're talking about a Canadiens team with a minus 28 goal differential, talking about a Canadiens team that can't seize the moment, right? They have 3 wins in their last 10, going to Sunrise, taking on a Panther team that has won back-to-back. Florida's playing for something. Florida's got 91 points right there with the Lightning, as the Lightning have won 3 in a row. The Panthers on a little bit of a heater, and both Florida teams are 1 point back of division-leading Toronto. Don't you want to win the division? The Washington Capitals, more or less, are going to play the second wildcard team. So whether that's the New York Rangers and their 77 points and they have ownership currently of the second wildcard, or will it be Montreal? Can Montreal sprint to the finish and get by the New York Rangers? I'm going to talk to you about what basically the math says about what teams need to get to point total wise to, I think, punch their ticket to playoff participation. But Washington's going to play the 8th seeded team in the Eastern Conference. Don't you want to win the Atlantic Division? There's value to winning the division, as the Battle of Ontario, perhaps, with Toronto taking on Ottawa in that hypothetical. So there's a lot to play for, and it's a massive game for both teams. I would say it's probably bigger for Florida than it is for the Montreal Canadiens. And I'm not saying, listen, don't hear me wrong here. I'm not saying the Canadiens are satisfied and they're good and they're just going to go through the motions here. That's not what I'm saying. But Florida is a legit Stanley Cup contender. They, of course, are the defending Stanley Cup champions here, while the Montreal Canadiens are taking steps to hopefully one day turn into the Florida Panthers. And maybe this guy will get it going. How about Ivan Demidov, right? Let's take you back to the playoff game with Dynamo. And Ivan Demidov authors one of the more awkward, frustrated, rink-side interviews you're ever going to see. Maybe you've seen it by now, maybe you haven't, right? But Ivan Demidov and Roman Rottenberg, the coach of his KHL team, do not see eye to eye. Roman Rottenberg runs that team like a dictator, right? Like, if you don't win the Gagarin Cup, we're not letting you go, despite the fact that he has a contract that expires at the end of May. That aside, all of these ultimatums around Ivan Demidov, what's he going to do, what's he not going to do, despite the fact that he's the leading scorer, he's the 13th forward. They're talking about basically sending him back to midget hockey when SKA season comes to an end, right? So all of that has been mounting. The pressure, the aggravation. All the while, Ivan Demidov has been resetting records for what he's been able to do production-wise for his age group. So all of that, it's all mounted, and the end result was this. And listen, full credit to the Rinkside reporter who did as a professional job as it can ever be done, right? She was fantastic, flawless, never stuttered, just kept moving along. What a pro's pro. But at the end of the day, it's not the best look for Ivan Demidov, but I understand. If you missed it, here it is.
Иван Демидов у нас в эфире. Иван, для вас это первый плей-офф КХЛ. Вот многие эксперты отмечают, что это прям как отдельный турнир. Вы это уже прочувствовали?
Как игра еще не началась, наверное, нет.
Ну а так вот в раздевалке, при подготовке.
Да.
В чем это проявляется?
Другой настрой.
У старших товарищей по команде или вообще из мира хоккея спрашивали какие-то секретики, советы по игре именно в плей-офф?
Не спрашивал.
Вы уверены настолько в себе? Может, какие-то ритуалы есть перед игрой?
Не, все как обычно.
По сопернику, по сегодняшнему «Динамо» много раз встречались в регулярке. Можно говорить, что уже очень хорошо знакомый соперник.
Да, 6 раз играли.
Вы сегодня максимально сосредоточены на игре. Я поняла. Удачи, спасибо.
So there he goes. There's Ivan Demidov. Great job by the reporter. Phenomenal job. Like, didn't take it personally. Love the touch at the end of it when she's like, listen, a lot of pressure. I get it, right? So, not so much. And then Ivan Demidov does what Ivan Demidov does. Speed, execution, hockey sense. And guess what? Ivan Demidov scores a playoff.
И борьба продолжается. Ильенко рубит клюшкой, мешает Демидову как может. Бардаков. У него было именно одно касание. И какая передача Зайцева. И Иван Демидов, который играет.
Nice goal. Nice goal, Ivan Demidov. Speed to the net, execution, and the finishing touch. Unfortunately, though, SKA down in their series 0-2, and it looks like they're going to be done and dusted, and Ivan Demidov can't get out of there fast enough. Ivan Demidov can't get here fast enough. And so we look at the prospects of the Montreal Canadiens moving forward, and I think, and I'm going to get to your comments here. I'm going to get to your comments when we talk about what this season has done, what this season has meant, where this team is ultimately going. And rest assured, Ivan Demidov is going to be a Montreal Canadien. And you're going to see him at camp in the fall of 2025. And what happens between the end of the Canadian season, whenever that may be, whether it's a playoff round or whether it's 82 regular season games and they're done and dusted, to be determined, right? To be determined. It doesn't change two things. Two things have been crystallized in my mind as it relates to this team. It's mission accomplished for the Montreal Canadiens. Like, I feel a couple of different ways here. A, the Montreal Canadiens have been thoroughly entertaining, frustrating, but lots of fun. And that comes with the territory, right, of being a fan of a team, right? The roller coaster ride of a team in good and bad times. And it also crystallized in my mind of the utmost priority. Like a lot of people are talking, and Marco D'Amico and I are going to talk about it this week. What's the bigger offseason priority for Montreal? Are we talking top 4 right-hand defensemen, or are we talking about a number 2 center for the Montreal Canadiens? And it's not close. Like, there is no debate. There is no debate. The Montreal Canadiens need a number 2 center ASAP, and how they go about and get that business done, that's going to be the fun part. But at the end of this season, wherever it may put the Canadiens, playoffs or not. It's been an incredible year. They've achieved their goals. They wanted to be in the mix. Nick Suzuki, I think we're going to be pretty good. They've done all of those things. And they've answered critics. They've answered themselves. They got the vote of confidence from management because the players went out and said and did what essentially they were going to do. And so it just instills this high level of trust that you have, I believe, if you're a manager, that you can trust the foundation that is being built with the Montreal Canadiens moving forward with Nick Suzuki. But there is no doubt. There is no doubt. Montreal must get aggressive this offseason in order to fill that hole. Now, listen, I like Nazem Kadri a lot. I don't know what it's going to take to pry him out of the Calgary Flames organization, but that's the type of player I think we talk about, right? That's the type of player we like to talk about here. About a proven guy, a responsible player, a guy with edge, and a guy who can score. That's what we're talking about as it relates to what the Montreal Canadiens need to do. And as much as I like Sam Bennett, I just have very little belief, very little faith that Montreal is going to be able to go out and acquire a target like Sam Bennett. And Elliot Friedman a couple of weeks ago on Hockey Night in Canada during an intermission talked about the fact that why does it sound like the Florida Panthers are ultimately going to be able to come to terms on an extension? And that's why Marco D'Amico from RG Media has been. I love the thought process of looking at other teams that are likely going to be cap strapped, and how do you take advantage of that type of situation, right? So it's game day for the Montreal Canadiens on this Sunday morning. Thanks for being here live on the Sean Starr Show. Greatly appreciate all the comments today, and once again, just. If you were with me yesterday and we cut it short, tried to go for about 45 or so minutes, but it was a weird experience. If you were with me, you knew I was dealing with a couple of different issues, which I took some time out of my Saturday to resolve, and so thanks for being back with me here. Let's see what's going on in the comment section today. Does 90 points win the wild card 2 spot? I think it's going to be less than 90 points. I think 86 to 88 points is going to get you in, personally. We'll go over the record here in a second. JR the Maverick, good morning, JR. The lack of depth is being exposed as guys are playing too much. They're making mistakes and taking penalties. I think that's a fair observation. I think it's an accurate, factual observation. Obviously, Mike Matheson has been wearing the goat horns here. And whether it's bad penalties, whether it's veterans not, finding another gear or just overtaxed, overworked, all of those things, I think it's all on the table. And I think we talk about the depth scoring of the Montreal Canadiens, for example, right? Like we like to talk about depth scoring in Montreal. It's a point of pride, is it not? That the Canadiens are this deep when it comes to how many double-digit goal scorers do the Montreal Canadiens have? And they've got a bunch. But a point that we're going to bring up this week on the channel as it relates to who's been scoring goals, how have they been doing it? And one of the points that you're going to listen to, hopefully, if you watch our video that comes out Monday morning at 10 o'clock, but it's free right now or accessible, I guess, for members of the Sean Starr Show. And we're up to 27 strong members. So you get some perks like priority comments, early access to all our videos. And so there's a video out now with Marco and I breaking down the Canadiens' dip in play and the reasons why. And one of the points that we brought up is game-winning goals. Who's scoring to propel the Canadiens back into a situation where they can arguably leave the game with points? And so when you look at, who leads the team in game-winning goals this season, you're not going to be shocked or even surprised when I tell you it's Cole Caulfield. Right? Stands to reason the leading goal scorer of the Montreal Canadiens has the most game-winning goals. Caulfield on 34 and 7 game winners. Nick Suzuki is next with 6. Jake Evans is third on the team with 5 game-winning goals. And then it's Patrick Laine with 4. But beyond that, when we talk about guys that have reached double digits in goals, okay? And the Montreal Canadiens have what? Like, they got a bunch of guys that have double digits in goals, right? But here's an interesting number. Josh Anderson has 13 goals this season, 0 game winners. Christian Dvorak, he's on 10 goals. He's also on 0 game winners. Emil Heineman, he's also on 10 goals. Also on 0 game winners. Lane Hudson has 5 goals, 0 game winners. Jake Evans has 12 goals, 5 game winners. And his shooting percentage, when it was upwards in the 30 percentile, and everyone was talking Jake Evans, he's at 17%. So it's very much an outlier that Jake Evans has 5 game-winning goals, almost 50% of his actual goal total this season. And look, you're going to take it all day, every day. But to me, it's a finer point of the details when we talk about, what the Canadiens have done, what they should be looking to do this offseason. And yes, it takes us back to the 2C role and who's going to play with this guy. Who's going to play with this guy? Because you got to fix this summer, end of sentence. Who's making that pass to Ivan Demidov? Who's making that pass to Ivan Demidov? As much as I like Alex Newhook, you can't honestly expect Alex Newhook to be that guy. Kirby Dach is not going to be that guy. You're not going to fit a square peg into a round hole, right? And that's Kirby Dach and his reality with the Montreal Canadiens. So, as we will explore this week on the channel, are the Montreal Canadiens truly in a high leverage situation, right? Are they truly in that high leverage situation where the cap space, the prospects, the maneuverability, how strong truly is it this summer? So we're going to take a good look at all of those points and answer those points on tomorrow's episode that comes out at 10 o'clock. But at the end of the day, the takeaway, the obvious end of sentence takeaway is this has been a phenomenal season for the Montreal Canadiens in or out of the playoffs. And maybe you have a different point of view because you had different expectations. I went into this season thinking, I'm not so sure. I'm not so sure about how potent this team is going to be. So for a moment last night, after the New York Islanders and Blue Jackets lost their games, the Canadiens moved back into a playoff spot, right? The regulation win total, more than Columbus, right? So that's where we're at now with this projected point total, with these 3-point games, blown leads somewhat on the regular, and the stretch drive, the sprint to the finish line starts at 1 o'clock from sunrise this afternoon. The Canadiens' 5-game losing streak, it's over. You're not taking it back. You're not going back. There are no mulligans. I think it's good for your mental well-being to look at the 5 games and throw it out. It's over with. A new kind of stretch drive. You want to start a new 4 or 5 game kind of breakdown, then let it begin this afternoon in Florida. Handle your business. But I do believe we're looking at probably 88 points to get you into the playoffs. So the New York Rangers go to San Jose and they flatten the Sharks. Would they drop 8 on San Jose? So New York now back into that second wild card spot. So let's take you over to the standings here very quickly. So now you can have a look at, here's the Rangers and their 35 wins with 74 games. So Montreal is going to pick up one of the 2 games in hand. They're going to play that this afternoon. Okay? So it's 75 points. And these regulation type victories, the number of regulation wins is ultimately going to be the tiebreaker for Montreal. Right? That's why we talked about it here with the Montreal Canadiens having 24 to the BJ's 23. Once you get past the wins, point total, right? I hope I didn't have to clarify that for everybody, but it's points, and then it's wins, and then it's regulation wins to separate who is going to take control here. Because the Red Wings are now 3 points back, 1 point back from being basically the bubble team. It is going to be an absolute insane sprint to the finish line. Who is going to grab it? Because look at this. This to me is wild. 4-5-1, 3-4-3. 3-6-1, 3-4-3, 4-6-0. Like, who's going to man up? Who's going to put their nuts on the table and said, come get me? Let's go. Like, nobody has stepped up to the plate yet and identified themselves as the team to be. Come match my energy, right? And maybe Montreal can be that team starting this afternoon from sunrise, ending this miserable 5-game losing streak. And so this is what we talk about, the parity in hockey. And I think that's why we're looking at, basically to get to where the Canadiens are with 10 games to go and they're 75 points. I think you're looking at Montreal. They got to figure out they need 13 more points, 12 to 13 more points, and whatever the formula in your mind is to get them there. Basically, Montreal's got to play, I believe, 600 level hockey here. Montreal's got to play 600 level hockey in order to get them over the finish line and get them to a place where I didn't think they were ever going to be this season. And that is very much in the mix, and they've been very much in the mix. Very much in the mix. And I think the rebuild also, I'll speak for myself at this point. Like, the rebuild has been 10 times better than I ever thought it was going to be. I've thoroughly enjoyed the mechanics of a rebuild. Watching players blossom, watching players struggle, watching the coach adapt, watching players adapt and evolve and go through the dips and figuring out how to dig themselves out of those situations. And to me, it's been an unbelievably entertaining ride, and the fact that they've won, the fact that they've clawed back, the fact that they've showed what I believe is to be tremendous character is a lot to build off of in terms of internal momentum, in terms of internal belief. And you can look at the polar opposite of that, I think, to prove my point. Like, watch the Buffalo Sabres, right? Like, watch the Buffalo Sabres sometimes on the ice. They look very much like a team that is, okay, maybe this is what we need to do to become the team that we want to be. Like, you can literally see them experiment on the ice, shift after shift. Sometimes they play with edge. Sometimes they're passive. Like, you can see them literally try to figure out in real time in a real NHL game. Like, I think all of us should count our lucky stars that the Canadiens are not the Buffalo Sabres organization. Because what you've seen just in this singular season, they've already steamrolled by the Buffalo Sabres, who are still lost in the wilderness without a guide or a flashlight to get them to safe passage, right? So, yes, this season has been a success. They've achieved their goals. I would argue all day to anybody that thinks otherwise. ZX is on Team Tank. Some Canadiens fans want that top 10 pick, right? The interview says it all, says Al. Can't wait to get out. No doubt. The mounting frustration, all right? Talking about this with Ivan Demidov, just one-word answers, would rather be anywhere else. Asked about the playoffs versus the regular season as he felt the difference. Hasn't played a game yet. Like, just full stop wants out of there. And that, to me, is just the ongoing drama, the long season. You're playing, you're not playing. Good to see Ivan Demidov scoring a goal in a losing effort. Black Mallow Tube, how's it going today? It's going well. Much better than yesterday. So we're having some fun back here. Lots of comments today, so it's nice to see everybody back on this game day. We're going to get lots on the Canadiens' defensive brigade coming up and what they need and holes they need to fill, because they're going to have some decisions to make pretty soon when it comes to, David Reinbacher's role with Lane Hudson. Where's Jaden Struble? Where's Arbor Jacki? What happens with Mike Matheson moving forward? Because we're going to get into that this week and trying to figure out transactions for the Montreal Canadiens, realistic transactions that make a lot of sense, right? And you're starting to see a little bit of a semblance here. Alex Carrier's game hasn't been as sharp as it needs to be. Nice to see on Friday night Caden Gooley back into the lineup after missing 21 games in 2 months, giving him some time to get back up to speed And when we look at where this Canadiens team is, figuring out the pieces to the puzzle that make up basically the top six for Montreal's defensive side. So we've got lots to get to today. Recliner Sports says interviewing a young kid during warm-up of his first career playoff game is a tough spot. I love the job the reporter did. I thought she was phenomenal. And we talk about, this team not having enough gas left in the tank. And, whether it's Alex Carrier, Nick Suzuki has had a couple of below standard games. We'll see how the captain responds in Buffalo today as we say good morning to Recliner Sports. Fox Sakes believes a big game from Nick Suzuki today. This season is already a major success. The rebuild is very much on track. Julie says, who would you want as your 2C? I mean, that's the $1 million question, man. At the end of it, that is simply the $1 million question. And, when we look at the possibilities for the Montreal Canadiens, I mean, the UFA market isn't going to be substantial. The biggest name on the board is Sam Bennett of the defending Stanley Cup champion Florida Panthers. And if he re-ups there, maybe you can look down. Maybe you can, follow Marco D'Amico's lead when he talks about Anton Lundell. But no matter what, no matter the name that's on the tip of your tongue, right? Maybe you look at Alexis Lafreniere. Maybe you really try to get creative with possible options. Maybe Matt Duchene out of Dallas, right? These are all the possibilities that I think the fan base often talks about on the regular. And understanding that the proof, right? Just look at the NHL trade deadline as a perfect example of if you really want to go out there and get that, you are going to have to pay a price. And are you prepared to see the organization? I'll give you two names. I'll give you two names, okay? Are you prepared to pay a price of Logan Mailloux? Are you prepared to pay that price? Because it's going to be a massive ask if you are looking at anybody via trade whose contract still has term left on it. So, yeah, you're looking not at the UFA market, you're looking to make a deal. And the Montreal Canadiens are basically going to have to take an educated guess and say, you know what? We're going to pass. Or it's green light go, and a guy like Logan Mailloux will be the player that's expendable, right? Will it be a veteran player like Mike Matheson, for example? And I know when you say Mike Matheson as a potential trade, I understand a lot of people in favor of that. Mike Matheson has been making a bunch of mental mistakes, right? Excuse or a reason when we talk about whether or not he's just tired, running out of gas. Excuse me. But those are the two names I believe are possibly being dangled or will be dangled in order to sweeten the pot, or will it be enough to get the priority filled this season? Because, Mike Matheson, who's a leader, Mike Matheson, who I still think in the right position is a very, very good defenseman and can put up points, can help run your power play. But the Montreal Canadiens already have this, right? Like Lane Hutson has emerged as arguably over this road trip, Lane Hutson has been the Canadiens' best player. And I think most of us are comfortable looking at Lane Hutson suggesting, this guy's skill level is going to be good enough to drag this team into the fight, right? And so if Lane Hutson has already moved ahead of Mike Matheson and he's running the power play, Logan Mailloux brings a great amount of offensive talent from the back end, tough guy, team guy. The defensive side of the game is still very much a work in progress. But all those other things are very, very real and very attractive. So, is it redundant to have Mike Matheson, Lane Hutson, and Logan Mailloux? Or are Logan Mailloux, who would be more attractive in a possible trade to other teams, the answer to the question of how do the Canadiens get a 2C? And this is what we talk about, man. This is what we talk about when it comes to having an educated guess on making sure that if you are going to green light go a transaction, you're going to be on the right side of that trade more often than you're not going to be on the right side of that trade, right? And so that's where I honestly think the Canadiens are at. And it's, when I look at how the Canadiens can do it, you try to find how many outs do the Canadiens have as they try to build up their defensive core. And I think you have very similar style players, and I think one or two of them can be expendable. So you're going to have to give up talent to go make a trade, end of the day, because it's not like the Canadiens are a secret organization. Like, oh, surprise, the Canadiens need a 2C. Everybody and their sister knows the Canadiens need a number 2 center, and they want it badly, right? So it's not a league secret. And guess what? There are other teams in hockey, like Montreal, that are ready to level up because of the belief, and the foundation, in their estimation, has been built up. So they too have cap space. They too have prospects. They too want to be aggressive and maneuver. So it's not as easy, and people see the Canadiens coming, and and maybe it's an optimistic perspective when I tell you that I love the fact that the Canadiens have an Asian as their general manager. I love the fact that we have a guy in this market that runs this team that comes from the shark world of player representation and that cutthroat world of negotiating contracts, trading players, working the media through PR, right? Like, that's a thing. We're aware of this. Agents will speak to hockey insiders and kind of fill the narrative to push their agenda. That's very much a thing that exists in sports, and hockey isn't different. And so I think it's a tremendous advantage to the Montreal Canadiens to have a guy like Kent Hughes as the backbone, the architect of this rebuild with Jeff Gorton moving forward, right? See, that's another money point, as the Bunny House brings to the table that we talk about. The Montreal Canadiens have 2 first-round draft picks, and that's another angle that I think legitimately, realistically, can be in play. Whether if Montreal has designs of moving up the draft board, which I think would be highly unlikely, because I think, in my opinion, I think they're past that. I am not on Team Tank, and I see it in the chat here. Team Tank, get a top 10 pick. I'm past that point. I'd like to see the Montreal Canadiens use some of these picks in order to go out and make some deals. At least I'm consistent. That's kind of where I was coming from in the weeks and days leading up to the trade deadline. Like, picks are a good thing. I can use them. It's a commodity. I can definitely use these things. Let's get back to more of your comments. Thanks for being with me. As we talk about making sure that we look at making the right picks. Guys like Ryan McDonough, Sergachev weren't mistakes, says a Black Mallow Tube. It's getting Gomez and Drouin that were the mistakes. Very fair. Very fair. And I can even remember at the time when the Canadiens went out and got Jonathan Drouin, and Mikhail Sergachev was going the other way, that it was a little bit of a red flag. It was a little bit of a red flag when John Cooper and the Lightning were like, listen, you're going to stay in Syracuse. You're going to stay in the American Hockey League. And, Jonathan Drouin thought highly of himself, and the rest, as they say, is history. Now he's on an all-star team in Colorado, and things are moving swimmingly, right? And so we welcome you to game dates, 1 o'clock. Montreal Canadiens and Florida Panthers live on TSN 690 as the Canadiens look to erase a 5-game losing streak and get back on track here. Get back on track and staying very much in the fight and not getting drowned out. Montreal has a home-and-home with the Panthers. They host Florida on Tuesday, taking on Boston on Thursday, and hosting Philadelphia on Saturday. So the next batch of games after this afternoon, the traditional Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday breakdown, as Montreal has, after today, 3 more road games to end the season at Nashville next Sunday. Great, another Sunday game at Ottawa and at Toronto. Back-to-back Friday and Saturday as we move into Masters weekend as the Canadiens' regular season winds itself down. more comments coming in today. Sean, good morning. We really need a win today. Steph Howard, what's up, Steph? I'm not on Team Tank. I'm on Team Let's Not mess things up and mess up the next step of the rebuild because of fan pressure. So as we look at where the Montreal Canadiens are at today, yes, very much in the mix. And Neil says both first and a second next year for a 2C. Will that get anything back in return? I mean, let me flip the script and let me ask you that question. What's more valuable in your mind today? 2 first-round picks that the Canadiens currently have, or Joshua Ottawa? Would you rather have somewhat of an unknown or 2 complete unknowns? I would rather have the draft picks, personally. So I don't know. I don't know the value of a Joshua Ottawa, and I don't think you should get your hopes up that Joshua Ottawa is a good enough asset that teams can look at what he's done at the American Hockey League level, because that's where the sample is. That's where the money is or the belief should come from, is that Joshua Ottawa's numbers in the AHL don't translate to the National Hockey League. Are you a general manager that believes or sees that eventually it will? In my amateur opinion, I don't see it. Jay Patel says 2 complete unknowns every day, says Jay Patel, answering the question, what's more valuable today? Somewhat of an unknown or 2 first-round picks, right? Vinny says the picks have higher trade value. The Bunny House says, I want Matty Beniers with the Montreal Canadiens. He could be available. That's, teams like the Seattle Kraken have so many depth players that they have centermen playing on the wing. So we look for patterns. We look for the belief that the Montreal Canadiens can take advantage of some of these teams. Peter Puck, thanks for being here as always, my man. Dave Laws, I'm bringing out the Lucky Habs jacket for this afternoon's game, 1 o'clock from Sunrise, Florida, as the Florida Panthers. It's fascinating to me that the Montreal Canadiens have had the level of success that they've had against Florida, right? Knowing that, Montreal has outscored them 7-1 in 2 games. Like, I can't figure out. Can you figure this out? It's a 5-game losing streak going into this afternoon. Florida Panthers 44-25-3. They're 9-7-1 against the Atlantic Division. And also a pretty disciplined team for the most part. And we'll see if the Montreal Canadiens can actually have a little bit more discipline to their game today, because when you serve more time in the box in Florida, you really don't have a chance to win. The Panthers are 21-7 when they commit fewer penalties than their opposition this season. So, Montreal right now, 4th in the National Hockey League, basically taking about 4 minutes per game, or just a shade under 4 minutes per game on the average. Nick Suzuki, 22 goals, 52 assists for the Canadiens. Juraj Slafkovsky has got 5 goals and 4 assists over his last 10 games. As once again, Slafkovsky has turned very much into a second-half player, and really no notable injuries going into the game today. We know Aaron Ekblad is suspended for 20 games, but right now, Montreal 3-4-3 over their last 10. They averaged 3 goals in their last 10 games, while also taking about 10 minutes in penalties. So that's what we talk about here. We talk about the mental fatigue, and, these are the signs we point to lead us down the path of they're making mistakes that they generally don't make mistakes. They generally don't, right? Rick Springhetti says the value of picks depend on the team that's acquiring them. For Anaheim, it's not as valuable. For Boston and Pittsburgh, 2 rebuilding teams with high picks or prospects, it's very valuable. Totally agree. Totally agree. And I think that was also some of the angle we talked about, right? When we spoke about what we thought the Canadiens were going to do with the deadline and Pittsburgh, Sidney Crosby, yada, yada, yada. And those, to Rick's money point, it's looking at teams that have decided to liquidate because they had a window of winning and decided to go for it, right? And no problem. I think if I were a fan of the Pittsburgh Penguins, I'd love the fact that my team is always trying to be aggressive and always trying to go for it and always trying to capitalize on that window of opportunity. And the Canadiens are creating a window of opportunity, but obviously it's not wide open yet. And so that's where you look at teams like Dallas, for example, or the Pittsburgh Penguins or the Boston Bruins that move prospect, that move picks in order to seize the moment. I get it. And so that's why we talk about leverage situations and going out there and basically being a bully. And that's why this offseason is going to be massive. It's going to be massive. Because if you're trying to put the pieces of a story together, right? Ken Hughes, before the deadline, when he spoke to his captain, you don't want me to trade your guys, go out there and win. And what did they do? They manned up, they sacked up, and they went out there and got themselves back into a playoff spot and were more or less in a playoff spot for the better part of a week. So, the proof was there. You proved what you're trying to do. And so, I'm comfortable looking at, this Canadiens team saying, okay, you've passed this test. I'm ready to go out and try something different. And I think the Canadiens have earned the opportunity to try something different. And that means not stockpiling. That means using assets, using cap space, using prospects to go make it happen. And so the Montreal Canadiens get set to take on Florida at 1 o'clock today. We're going to be fascinated to see where this all goes. And what Martin St. Louis plans to do with his lineup. Because, are we going to see Arbor Xhekaj play up front this afternoon? Because, Montreal has some decisions to make as it relates to what they're doing with their defensemen. And I know there are a lot of people, they look at David Savard. I have not been the biggest Arbor Xhekaj good enough to play defense on the regular. I like the fact that Arbor Xhekaj has evolved. I like the fact that Arbor Xhekaj has gotten better. But as a defenseman, being dragged by David Savard for sure. But I think David Savard is the easing whipping boy. And I think Arbor Xhekaj, because of how handsome he is and how tough he is and that he fights and he's got a cool nickname and all this different stuff, I think Arbor Xhekaj is obviously a fan favorite, and I think it clouds the judgment. I think it clouds the judgment of some people. If it were my decision, I don't necessarily think David Savard would be sitting for me. I like David Savard as a shot blocking, good veteran presence, and I think Arbor Xhekaj, man, has got a lot of room to grow. And I wouldn't tell you today that I think. They like the team toughness. They like how good of a team guy Arbor Xhekaj is, but do they trust Arbor Xhekaj situationally? Absolutely not. Does Martin St. Louis want more from Xhekaj? Yes. Does Martin St. Louis believe Arbor Xhekaj can do more? I don't know. I'm not so sure. And that's the other thing about this team, about injuries, as Norm Tap brings up here. Armia has been playing hurt. Was it a mistake to even play him at all? It's a good question. And I've thought about it. And I'm going to tell you basically how I think my way through this, okay? And I want to be very, very crystal clear when I talk about the differences, right? There's a difference between believing internally that you look at this season through 72 games ago, fist bump, we did it. We wanted to see forward progression. We wanted to see positive evolution and development. And I think you can credibly say yes to those questions now that they've played 72 games. But there's a difference between that and being satisfied, right? And I'm not saying the Canadiens are satisfied and they're going to coast to the finish line. Like the fact that they've been in a playoff position and now they're still on the outside looking in, but right there, they could see it. They can reach out and almost touch it. That's how close they are. It motivates you to keep going and play hard, right? But when we talk about why the Canadiens didn't make a move at the deadline, when we talk about the amount of players that have been dealing with nagging injuries, right? And a Norm Tap brought it up in the comment section. Yoel Armia, Josh Anderson. Josh Anderson, between every game, is on a therapy day, right? Bunch of guys on this team playing hurt and dealing with injury. And so the question is, why didn't they call anybody up? Why didn't they look at Laval's team and say, you know what, Armia, you sit for a couple of games. Anderson, you sit for a couple of games. Let's bring up Florian Jacki. Let's reward this guy for the efforts that he's provided this season in Laval, right? Why didn't they do that at all? Ken Hughes kind of told you at the deadline why he didn't want to do that, right? They didn't want to handcuff a very good Laval Rocket team making positive strides, right? And so the question is, why do they think that? Why do they look at the Laval Rocket and saying, let's keep that ride on track, let's keep them going, while the Montreal Canadiens go through the motions and the roller coaster of injured players in and out of the lineup, right? To me, I think I know the answer. Right? It's because of the fact that I believe upper management in Montreal has looked at the team collectively and said, man, we've done it. And now, the priority, I don't think going into the season was to make the playoffs. If we don't make the playoffs, man, heads are going to roll. Guys are going to get fired. Guys are going to get traded. We can't trust these guys. I don't think that's true at all. I think what they've done here is proven to management that they are very much on the right track, that they very much have the right coach, and that they very much have the right players to build from. And that the priority is the continual development of future Montreal Canadian players. And to me, that's why Laval has stayed intact. Why guys haven't been granted an opportunity, or Josh Anderson been granted an opportunity to rest, right? It's doing both things. Understanding that, you're challenging the Montreal Canadiens to understand what it takes to win at the NHL level. And that means winning without your full roster of players, because everybody is going to get dinged and bruised, and you're going to have to deal with that. And realizing that the Montreal Canadiens rebuild isn't over, that they haven't turned the corner, and that they're still developing guys, and that the priority is letting guys like Engstrom and Davidson and Owen Beck and Jacki do their thing in Laval, lose together, win together, and develop together. That, to me, is how I choose to sort out what this season has meant, what it says, and where they're going. And I have zero disagreement. If that is, in fact, if I've nailed their strategy right now in my description, I do not disagree. I wouldn't have done anything differently. I like that there's communication. I like that they talk to players. I like that there's belief. I like that there's internal challenges, but also realizing that because you've had a level of unexpected success, it shouldn't dramatically change your game plan. You have to stick to the plan and trust what you're doing, because it's rewarded your organization, and the fan base is rejuvenated, excited for hockey again, and the very strong belief that this team is doing some really heavy lifting, and that, yes, this market can absorb a rebuild. So, yeah, as it stands now, looking at the Montreal Canadiens projected lineup, right? And always fun to go to dailyfaceoff.com, right? And I know a few of you had brought it up in the comments. There he is. There's Arber Jacki on the left side there, with Jake Evans and Yoel Armia, with Anderson, Dvorak, and Gallagher, Emil Heineman, Alex Newhook, Patrick Laine, Slavkovsky, Suzuki, Caulfield. I'm moving forward, thanks to the Daily Faceoff, as always, with the projected lineup for 1 o'clock. I see so many comments here. Crosby. What are we going to do with Sidney Crosby? What are you going to do with Sidney Crosby? I've been talking about Sidney Crosby as a fit. It would be the perfect fit, right? And as we know, Who doesn't want Sidney Crosby? Who doesn't want Sidney Crosby? And the only way that's going to happen is Crosby's going to have to look at his team this summer and basically tell them, yeah, trade me to Montreal, please. And, okay, you can basically have kind of whatever you want, I would guess. Not named Ivan Demidov. More comments coming in today from Al. I think this Habs team can accomplish two major issues this summer. Get a 2C by trading Matheson, +++, and sign an experienced right defenseman if Savard is retiring. Thank you. Emil Heineman on line number 2. Emil Heineman looking to score a goal for the first time in what seems like forever. Emil Heineman hasn't scored a goal in a minute. But that shot and that belief that Emil Heineman can get it done, I believe Emil Heineman can get it done. He's on 18 points after 57 games. And we have not seen Emil Heineman score a goal since January 3rd. January 3rd in a 4-2 loss. Oh, that was the Chicago game. The 4-2 loss at Chicago. So it's been since January 3rd since Emil Heineman has scored a goal. That's what we talk about, right? It's what we talk about. About these prospects and where these goals were coming from. You know, Canadiens like to pride themselves on the amount of players that have double digits in goals. Emil Heineman hasn't scored since January 3rd. Naz26 says, Malkin, if Malkin was 3 years younger, maybe go after him. But with 1 year remaining on a deal, would rather play for one team for 20 years or allow a trade to Montreal. And it's funny because, you know, I love the Evgeny Malkin possibility. And we kind of brought this up not that long ago. Let me see if I could find it here. It wasn't that long ago. We were talking about right here. It was actually 6 days ago. And I'll see if I could show it to you here for a second. Yeah, right there. So you see that video, the right fit with Ivan Demidov there in the middle and Evgeny Malkin over his shoulder, right? Evgeny Malkin would be another phenomenal fit. And I understand the angle of Ivan Demidov, Evgeny Malkin, you know, the transition. What would it take? What would it take for the Pittsburgh Penguins? And I think, you know, Rick Springhetti brought this up not long ago in the comments section of, you know, the Pittsburgh Penguins could be a very interesting option for the Montreal Canadiens because of where they're at and what they're looking to do. Steph Howard says, Crosby is great only at the end of the rebuild. It will kill our prospect pool in the trade. It will also artificially improve us for only a short period. Only if he plays for another 5 years, Steph Howard is on board. Rick Springhetti says, to me, question is, what do you prefer? A very tough and intimidating Jack guy who often makes mistakes and needs to be sheltered, or Jaden Struble, better player, physical, but less intimidating? Interesting proposal, right? Interesting proposal. Because I often go back to this. You know, do you believe having, and let's go back in time for a moment. Do you believe having someone like Matt Rempe, George Larac, take your pick of tough guys, right, that you've seen in hockey. Do you believe that by having players like that, it makes your team tougher? It makes your guys stand a foot taller because they're standing on the shoulders of Matt Rempe, right? Like, I'm not so sure. Like, I believe Arbor Xhekaj is an intimidating guy. Like, you're making a deliberate decision if you decide that you want to fight Arbor Xhekaj. I don't think anybody is scared of Arbor Xhekaj that plays in the NHL. I really don't believe that. But does he make the Montreal Canadiens more menacing? Are the Montreal Canadiens running around because they can do so because they've got Arbor Xhekaj patrolling the back end? Like, I don't believe that. And so to answer Rick Springhetti's question here is which would you prefer? A tough, intimidating Xhekaj who often makes mistakes and needs to be sheltered, or Struble, better player, physical, but less intimidating? Like, the answer to me is obvious all day, every day. As soon as you bring in the proposal of often makes mistakes, needs to be sheltered, what's the debate? Jaden Struble, end of sentence, factually, is a better player. Can play physical. Has risen to the challenge of playing with Lane Hudson and doesn't need to be sheltered. Like, we're not talking about a team, in my opinion, that's still figuring things out. You know, Montreal has figured a good deal out. And I want reliability. I want trustworthiness. I don't want often mistakes and sheltered players playing minutes on the regular. That's not what I'm looking for. I believe the Canadiens have moved past that point where, oh, he makes mistakes, but. No, the Canadiens are 2 points out of a playoff spot and have been in the playoff spot for a better part of a week. The internal growth is ginormous, collectively and individually. And so for me, the answer is very easy to figure out. Very easy to figure out, you know? And, you know, if we talk about value and what Rick Springhetti brings up, and I know, a lot of people love Arbor Jacki because he's a fighter and he's tough and he's a great teammate, and you're happy to have him on your team. I get it. And maybe there are teams in the NHL that look at Arbor Jacki and say, let me get this guy over here. I could do more with that guy than you guys can, right? These are the decisions we talk about all the time. All the time. Lots of comments today. Thank you so much for being with us. Good to be on. Good to be on talking hockey with everybody as usual. Peter Puck says, yes, they are. I watched a guy in Spit and Chicklets that told him he was scared of him. I mean, but who was it? Like, you know, was it Leon Draisaitl? Like, you know, I just don't think when these guys are on the ice, I don't think they react that way. Let me see here. Paul says if Habs were to play Panthers in the playoffs in the future, they would need Jacki. When the Montreal Canadiens lost to the Tampa Bay Lightning, how did they do it? I mean, if they were to play the Panthers in the playoffs, they would need Arbor Jacki. Why? To fight Matthew Tkachuk? I'm not so sure. You need physical, intimidating, good players. I do not think fighting factors into whether or not you win or lose a playoff round. I strongly would disagree with that. Intimidation, physicalness, I get it. Yes, you need that stuff. Because to answer my own question, how did the Canadiens get to the Stanley Cup final when we moved past Carey Price? I mean, we could talk about Ben Sherratt, we could talk about Shea Weber, we could talk about the price you had to pay physically to get to the front of the net. But guess what? These guys weren't mistake-prone players all the time. And that is where the rubber meets the road, my friends. You know, I would rather have a less intimidating player on my defensive brigade than someone who is intimidating, but I don't know if they're going to cough the puck up or make a behind-the-back no-look pass down the middle of the ice. You know, or you don't have the confidence to step up because you keep backtracking, and forwards keep moving on you. I don't want mistake-prone players in crucial moments. And I don't think any coach does either. And that's why everybody was lauding the Alex Carrier acquisition, right? Oh, Alex Carrier. Because Justin Barron wasn't trustworthy. Wasn't good enough to do the job, wasn't reliable enough. They bring in a guy like Alex Carrier, and everybody loves him. Oh, one of the best deals in hockey. Because he brought stability, he brought reliability, he brought predictability. That's what these guys do. That's what you need. You want to win Stanley Cups, you need reliability, predictability, less adventure. And, you know, Arbor Jacki's in that spot where he's trying to work out the various kinks to his game, whether he does that here or whether he does that with another NHL team. You know? Sheldon, good morning, Sheldon. No, they need him to prevent cheap shots on the start, like Brad Marchand. Plus, Arbor can play a hard physical game as well. No doubt. I don't think no one disputes the physicality Arbor Jackeye brings to the table. You know, and again, like how many? There's so many cheap shots in hockey, filled with guys that have had tough guys on their team. Peter Puck says, Sean, I totally disagree with you. If Arbor wasn't there, guys like Caulfield, Suzuki, Demidov would be targeted every game. You don't know what you've got until he's gone. Okay. I mean, I just don't see it that way. I just don't see it that way. Like, do you believe that a player like, let's say Sam Bennett today, right? Sam Bennett says, you know what? I'm not going to body check Cole Caulfield today because Arbor Jackeye is on the other side. I'm not going to hit him. I'm not going to run Nick Suzuki. I'm not going to cross-check Nick Suzuki because Arbor Jackeye is on the other side of the ice. Like, I don't think hockey's played that way. Alex Guédon says, what do you think the main contributor is to the slow starts other than fatigue? I mean, it's a combination of things too, right? I mean, I'm a big believer in mental fatigue. And I think for me, one of the other massive contributing factors is kind of what we saw a little bit on Saturday in that comeback win over, the shootout loss to Colorado, right? When Colorado made it 4-1 in the third and Montreal clawed all the way back. And one of the post-game comments from Nick Suzuki was, maybe we showed the team a little too much respect out of the gate, right? And you know what I think that means in my mind anyway, is when a player like Suzuki comes out and talks about we gave them too much respect, right? Is understanding that you're dealing with a very, very good hockey team. A very strong hockey team. And knowing that the difference, let's say, between playing Colorado and Chicago is maybe Chicago, you can come out there and make a mistake or two and they're not going to burn you. Whereas if you're playing Colorado, there really is no room whatsoever to make these kind of mistakes. And that's the respect. You respect the talent that the Colorado Avalanche bring to the rink every day because they will make you pay. And I think that's where Montreal is at when it comes to slow starts, that sometimes you're so focused on the details, the finer points, you lose the rhythm of playing a game. And you lose the flow of a game because now you're thinking technically, you're thinking situationally, as opposed to when you've nailed that stuff down, the game can come to you naturally and you can just react to it, right? That's how I think the Montreal Canadiens have been victimized by slow starts. It's different when we're talking about a team that, like Montreal, doesn't have an all-star roster, talking about a Montreal Canadiens team that is fighting for their lives to stay in the mix and be proud for the job that they've done, and rightfully so. But they don't have it embedded in their muscle memory yet of what's required to let the game come to them. And we can talk about the pressure now that, now there are 10 games to go in the regular season, and the Montreal Canadiens are feeling a little bit of internal pressure of knowing that every mistake can be magnified, knowing that you can't afford to drop points, blow leads, etc., always playing catch up. So when you add up all of those things, in my mind, it kind of explains why the team can start slowly, not look as sharp, or lose some of the finer points that got them back into a playoff conversation. And it's to me, it's the hallmark of a young, inexperienced, we're not entirely there yet kind of team. And that's why this rebuild today and this season today has been phenomenal. It has full stop been phenomenal because of what they've done, where they've come from, and honestly what they're doing. So I think about it a lot. I love the mechanics, as I said. I love the mechanics of a rebuild. I think it's really fun to watch development. It's really fun to watch prospects. It's fun to watch a coach who's modernized, who lets players kind of breathe. Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, I don't think a lot of us are just going to see the value of Arbor Jacki the same way. Like, I'll end this. I mean, I don't want to make it, if you're down by 3 and need to shake things up with a fight, if Arbor isn't there, who does that job? You know? I mean, it's not 1987 anymore, man. I don't know. How about your goal scorers score a goal? How about Cole Caulfield shakes it up by scoring a frickin' goal? Jaden Struble can fight. Josh Anderson can fight. I mean, if that's where we're at here, that you're down by 3 and you need Arbor Jacki to fight, and that he's going to occupy a roster spot, I don't want to make this into an Arbor Jacki dumbfest. I like Arbor Jacki. I like what he brings to the table. But I think as the Canadiens are developing and trying to turn themselves into a contender, roster spots on this team are exceptionally valuable. And as you know, if you watch me on the regular, you know I'm a diehard golf guy. You know I love the game of golf. And I just saw this comment here: goal scorers don't win cups. I hope that's sarcasm. I really hope that's sarcastic. But anyways, I'm a big believer of you've got 14 clubs in your bag. You can carry 14 clubs. Every club in your bag has to earn a spot. You don't put a 7-1 in your bag because Justin Thomas has a 7-1 on TV. If you can't hit a 7-1 and make it work for you, then it shouldn't have a spot in your bag. And to me, an NHL roster should be built the same way. If you cannot justify this player in your top 6, then that player does not have a roster spot. End of the day. No, Jay Gallant, I've never played hockey. I don't even know what hockey is. You donkey. Sheldon says they're developing because they have the space and room to do things they do. Why? Because there is a check and balance in place, and his name is Wi-Fi. Astor says, you say that, Sean, but let's just say they lose the last 10 games and the end of the season with less points than last year. They still need to prove something in this last stretch, even if no playoffs. Like, I get it. That's your prerogative. But I've chosen to look at this team and say, the body of work through 72 games is enough for me to move forward, right? The Bunny House says Florian will eventually take Arbor's place for toughness. He's pretty impressive. Florian Jacki's had an unbelievable look at this guy's season. I love it. Why are we justifying Matheson, who has made the same mistakes all season, and he has never been benched? Listen, that's where I think sometimes Marty St. Louis comes into the situation. Like, Marty St. Louis is also learning as he's going, right? He's learning as he's going, and sometimes, you fall into that trap that a lot of coaches will do, is veterans. Trust. They love that, right? Astor says they definitely improved from last season, but I still need to see a turnaround from this kid. That's just me. I get it, brother. I get it. Matheson was fine. He's just tired from the overwork, and he's playing a position and he's playing a role on this team. I think we can all agree here. We can all agree that at the end of the day, Mike Matheson is in a spot where he's not best suited. He's asked to do a lot. And I don't know if he can. Let's see here. Yeah, so many comments. Just fun. Just great interactions all show. All right. Yeah, so lots of comments today. Habs and Panthers this afternoon at 1 o'clock. Listen to it live on TSN 690. And just trying to see very quickly here. No, I don't see it yet. And don't forget, as we wind down the month of March here, a big shout out to my friends at Canuck, where you can get the latest in men's and ladies winter fashion by going to their website and take advantage of their end of season sale. Check them out online or in store, 485 Rachel, corner Barrie. You can find them whenever you need them online at Canuck.com. It's their end of season sale. And of course, proud sponsor of the Sean Star Show. You can save up to 70% on selected models. And they have lots of inventory. Look here, save up to 50%, save up to 50%, save up to 50%. So yeah, you've got great high quality jackets, 65% savings on this beautiful men's jacket that will keep you nice and warm. And they have a cold room there when you go shop in line at shop in store at 485 Rachel, corner Barrie in Montreal. And the type of garment that will last you, take care of it. It will last you almost your lifetime. So go check them out. Support the show by supporting our sponsors, Canuck.com. End of season sale. You have today and tomorrow to get it done. Save upwards of 70% and lots of makes and models available for men's and ladies. So go check them out, 485 Rachel, or online at Canuck.com, where the savings can be had there as well. Thanks for watching. Thanks for contributing. As always, enjoy the game this afternoon at 1 o'clock. And don't forget, I'll be back on the radio tomorrow morning. Tomorrow morning, yeah, bright and early. Back to the grind of terrestrial radio tomorrow at 6 a.m. 6 a.m. So thank you. And thank you so much for a good debate today, good conversation, back and forth, and always enjoy it. There's always room for respected debate on this channel at all times. So thank you so much for watching and commenting and interacting. We'll be back on Monday with a brand new episode with me and Marco D'Amico. And have yourselves a great day and enjoy the game.